Hey friend, in this tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you 3 simple paintings that are going to help you escalate and grow in watercolor quickly. We're going to be starting with wet on wet technique if you are new to watercolor or you just want to come back to the basics and try to develop your technical side. Then wet and wet is one of the most beautiful aspects of watercolor. It's when obviously 2 wet areas of pigment and water touch and bloom and bleed together. And then we're also going to explore some painting with wet on dry, layering, glazing. So these 3 paintings are going to help you step up and level up your game with watercolor. Very simple, super fast painting. So if you're ready, let's dive in. So to get started, everything that I'm using in this video, all the supplies will be linked in the description of this video below. But we're just going to start with getting to know the brush and how it can maneuver. We're going to just be using a size 12 or size 16 or size 6, whatever size you have, round brush. I'm using a Princeton 4050 size 12 round. And we're also getting familiar with not only the fine line of a round brush, but also the belly of the brush and how wet and wet techniques, just by painting simple circles. So this exercise might be easier for you if you're not super familiar with watercolor technique and all of that, to just stick with warm colors like pinks, reds, and oranges, or just blue colors like cool colors like blues, greens, and yellows. Because if you're just getting started with a tutorial like this, you might be concerned with what color to pick up next. And what I'm doing here is I'm using a full range of colors. I'm using both warm colors and cool colors, so that might be a little bit overwhelming at first. So try out different color palettes, but the main thing we're focusing on right here is getting a good understanding of how to use a vertical hold with your brush. So to do these circles, I'm swirling my brush around the outline of a circle with a vertical hold, meaning the handle of my brush is straight up and down, so it's a 90-degree angle away from the paper. And I'm putting medium to heavy pressure on it as I swirl around and then filling it in with a slanted hold. So I'm doing a slanted hold to fill it in a little bit quicker. The reason for this is these are round brushes. So when you use a vertical hold, you'll be able to use the fine point of the brush. And then on a slanted hold, you get to use a wider stroke by using the belly of the brush. Another thing that we're incorporating here with this technique, with this style of quick painting to help you learn things quickly, is wet and wet technique and how that works. So wet and wet technique, if you're new to watercolor, is a beautiful aspect of watercolor that, like I said in the intro, is when 2 areas of swatches or wet pigment and water touch each other and bloom. So as you can see, like for example, that reddish pink color is blooming into the purple and the little blue next to it, the orange is blending into the blue, etc. That's called a bloom, and that's able to happen when you are working with wet and wet technique. So I'm painting the circle first, and then I'm gradually getting closer and closer to its neighboring circle, and then just letting those circles touch barely. You don't want to overlap too much, because if you overlap the neighboring circle, it's going to grab some of that color and bring it into that other circle, so your colors won't be super clean. It'll kind of get muddy. So if you want clean blooms like I'm getting in this painting, you want to make sure to just barely kiss or touch the neighboring circles. And if you're also trying to incorporate some sort of knowledge on where to place your colors, start off with just doing a couple of colors like blue and green, for example, or mixing up your values of blues and doing a monochromatic style painting of these circles. So you're doing light and dark blues by just getting lighter values, like I have here with this light blue with mostly water on my brush and just a touch of pigment. And then just varying up the sizes of your circles to kind of create a cascade of flow between your circles, your shapes, throughout your piece. So not all of my circles are the exact same size. I'm going between larger circles, medium-sized circles, and smaller circles to kind of break up the movement and create a little bit of a cascade. Along with that, because I am using a piece with a lot of different colors in it, I am making sure to space out my warm colors and my cool colors. You'll notice that my yellows aren't all clumped together in one spot, or my greens or my purples and pinks, etc., because that would just kind of draw people's attentions to that one area and then make them go on to the next and want to pair things up. So you want to create kind of a zigzag or bounce kind of cascade with your colors, as well as the size and shape of your circles. So I'm going between light values of colors and dark values of colors. Like I have dark pinks and light pinks just by adding water to my mixture to get a lighter pink and a thicker amount of paint to get a darker pink, etc. So really just take your time with this piece. Use a small brush if that feels more comfortable with you. Like right now I'm using a size 6 round brush. And make sure you're outlining the circle with your vertical hold and swirling your fingers around the outline of that circle and then filling it in with a slanted hold so that you can fill it in much quicker. I've seen a lot of times in my in-person workshops where people who are a little bit newer to using round brushes will sit there and try to fill in a circle with the tip of the brush or using a vertical hold, and that just takes much longer than if you were to flip it on its side and use the belly of the brush to go a little bit quicker. So you want to really get used to this technique and to start advancing your skills, your watercolor skills. You also just want to paint this very quickly. So I know that you're going to be thinking about a lot of different things like that I'm saying in this explanation, like sizes of circles and colors and spreading things out and zigzag and all of that. But really, to get this really down quickly, you want to just paint quickly. Even if it doesn't look the way you want it to look or how the tutorial looks, it doesn't matter. Just practice the technique over and over again. Doing this quickly will allow you to really utilize wet and wet technique. And the next style of painting we're going to do is going to kind of get you some experience with glazing and wet on wet using a very geometric kind of stripy pattern. So glazing is when you layer a lighter glaze on top of a base layer or something that you've painted just to shift the color a little bit or the tone a little bit. And so I'm just painting in with a size 3/4 inch wash brush from the Aqua Elite series from Princeton. And every time I cross over one of these stripes with a different color, I am glazing over it or I'm layering over it. Technically, glazing is when you do it when it's dry. So I'm just doing it while it's still wet to create this pattern, but it gives you a slightly different shade when you crisscross or you layer or overlap with these stripes. So we're just seeing and we're testing out, because we're experimenting and playing with new techniques to advance our skills in watercolor, how these stripes interact with each other using wet and wet technique, but also at the same time using glazing. So I'm just using a variety of different colors. I've got this pyrrole orange color, and then I'm striping it over the blue. Orange and blue are contrasting colors, so it'll be interesting to see how those two colors kind of blend together and how the orange glazes on top of the blue. And I love how the orange is blending into the blue. I think that is super interesting and fun to look at. And so this is also a good exercise or painting to do to kind of get you to play and do something a little bit more contemporary and colorful and unique with the more abstract kind of geometrical style stripies. So this next stripe is one of my favorite colors from my Mary. It's called Green Gold. And so putting that almost green, yellow green next to the pink, green and red or pink are contrasting colors. So that's a nice little note there about color theory. And so playing with a stripe or more geometric style painting, there's less for you to think about versus something like painting flowers. So incorporating different colors together and seeing how you like it and how they're harmoniously working together or not so harmoniously working together is a great way to test out your color theory skills as well. So now I've got this bright green from my Mary. Love that pop of color and how it's bleeding in with the green gold and the pink, light pink that I have. And now I want to stripe in a deeper pink next to the blue. So we're just kind of going for it and playing with colors and seeing how we like them. But you want to think about contrasting colors, so colors that sit directly opposite of each other on the color wheel, being great elements or ways to bring in a lot of focus to a certain area and make those colors feel brighter, incorporating lighter and darker colors. But the main focus with this style of painting and tutorial or exercise is to just see and experiment with how colors interact with each other when they're layered on top of each other. So because that pink was really strong under that purpley gray blue, I'm going to grab more of that purple color and just cover up where that pink was bleeding into a little too far for my liking. So you can do that with watercolor. It can be forgiving, and if you don't like how far something is bleeding, you can just paint right over it. You get to break the rules. So a lot of these exercises, more beginner exercises, are good for not just beginners, but also advanced painters as well, because it'll teach you to continue to break the rules and do things how you kind of want to do them. So we're just adding in some neutral colors now to balance all of the vibrant, bold colors. This is just more of the style that I wanted to take it. You can go so many different directions with color palette in any of your paintings, but especially with geometric or abstract paintings. But the main focus here, again, is to just see how the watercolor incorporates with the other elements of watercolor when they are striped over, when they are glazed over or layered on top of each other, how they blend or how transparent the top ones, if the top layer is more transparent, how the color looks underneath it when it's layered on top of another color and you can see through it. So if this type of painting seems a little bit overwhelming at first, just start with a monochromatic color palette or maybe 2 different colors just to get started, and vary the lightness and darkness of each one of your stripes, especially if you're layering on top of a dark color. Try layering on top with a lighter color so you can see the stripe underneath and how that works with watercolor. It's not like most other mediums where if you layer on top of it, the medium is opaque and you don't see anything underneath, like acrylic or oil or even gouache, which is an opaque version of watercolor. So the next and final piece that we're going to be experimenting with is kind of similar to what I have in my book, Everyday Watercolor, one of the first exercises in my book, which is using a round brush to paint these very simple swatches using wet and wet technique, similar to the first experiment we did in this video. But instead of just swatches, we're kind of doing this abstract floral piece. So we've built, with the 2 previous exercises, we've done basic geometric shapes, and now we're just going to do very loose style swatchy florals. So we're not actually painting flowers. It's just kind of color blocks or swatches next to each other that make the shape of a flower or similar hues of a flower. So I'm using a size 12 round brush and a slanted hold to kind of squish around the brush to paint in these little swatches for the petals of the flower, and then popping in some yellow. And for my leaves, I'm just plopping the brush down with a green to give it this little leaf shape, adding in some purple little splotches and dots here and there, but moving very quickly, just like the first little experiment we did, moving very quickly so that each one of these little color swatches can blend and blur into the next one to create this beautiful abstract floral wet and wet piece. So I'm sprinkling in some blues, I'm sprinkling in some greens and yellows in between my pinks and reds and more floral warm colors to give it some dance and movement of color, and also changing up the shape, just like we did with the size of our circles in the first experiment. We're changing up the shape and the size of each one of these kind of color blocks to create a little bit more white space in certain areas, a little less white space in other areas, and using wet and wet technique to plop in other colors or to kiss these colors and let them bloom together. So I've got some pinks, some oranges as my main, and some reds as my main flower colors, and the blues, greens, and yellows are more of the accent colors, and the purples more of the accent colors. And I'm just here and there popping in some thin lines for stems or the effect of stems, and some sap green leaves, just using the tip of the brush and plopping it down. So as you can see, if you look at it, it looks like flowers, but it's not concrete, exact shapes of flowers. It's more abstract. So we're giving this chalking this up to as an exercise in wet and wet technique and just putting paint on paper. That's the most important part. If you don't take anything else away from this video, except for I need to paint quicker when I'm experimenting, I just need to put the paint down on the paper and paint and have fun, then that is the most valuable thing that you should take away from this video. Because oftentimes, especially in the beginning when we're learning something new, we're so afraid and very timid and nervous to put anything on this big white sheet of paper. But painting more abstract, swatchy type vibe paintings should be a little bit less intimidating and a little bit more playful and allow you to be a little bit quicker with just blobbing paint on paper. So just mix up the size, the shape, the colors, and now dropping in some purple spots on the pink while it's still wet, because we're utilizing wet and wet technique because we're painting very quickly. If you paint too slow, the swatches are going to dry and you're not going to be able to do or see all of these blooms. So again, I'm just making sure that I'm not concentrating all my reds together in one area, all of my greens together in another area, but making sure to bounce back and forth between all of my different colors to create movement. And this light silvery blue is just with a lot of water, a little bit of cerulean blue, and a touch of carbon black. And I love when it bleeds right next to the pinks. And then I'll go in once I'm done with my base and just kind of stripe in a little bit of some darker accent colors while they're all still wet. So you don't have to do this part, but this is just to add a little bit more contrast, to continue to keep yourself loose and just trying things out for trying things out's sake. I say this all the time in my books and tutorials on here on my YouTube channel, my Patreon, etc. But create something every day, even if it sucks. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you need extra help, a deeper dive into watercolor, the Complete Beginner's Guide to Watercolor is like a 2-hour free workshop on my YouTube channel, so make sure you check it out. We'll link it here. And I have a floral watercolor ebook that you can check out at free download as well. I also have my Patreon, which is exclusive monthly tutorials. As little as $2 a month all the way up to $20 a month, we get you extra bonuses and exclusive tutorials depending on which tier you sign up for. So if you want an art community, some live art classes, live Q&As with me, and just a wonderful way to expand and grow as an artist, then check out my Patreon. That's jennarainey.com/Patreon. Also, I have a beautiful flow state and art online course called The Art Within. We have hundreds and hundreds of people in this online course where they're expanding their foundations of sketching, of understanding shape and dimension, shading, perspective drawing, watercolor, art, any medium, doesn't matter what medium you paint with or you create with, The Art Within is for you. And then we also have lessons on flow state, tapping into flow state, that beautiful place where you're able to create your most optimal work as an artist. So if you're interested in that, that is jennarainey.com/the-art-within. As always, thank you for liking and subscribing to our channel. It means the world to us. If there was something that you maybe didn't know before watching this video, or that you also like to do to help improve your watercolor skills quickly, then drop them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.